might seem like a jumble of letters, but this case is graceful and it evokes a sense of airy weightlessness, like a spacewalk. This is the SSUPD Shuttle, or SSUPD Xhuttle. Welcome to Machines and More. As the name suggests, it is inspired by a space shuttle. It's a new ATX case that's launching. That's very different. I saw this guy at SSUPD's Computex booth this year, and even though I didn't have a chance to give you guys the preview on it because of all the content we were doing at the time, I saw this case and I knew I had to check it out when it launched, even though I don't usually review many ATX cases. So today I'm going to show you my build. We'll also talk through the case and I'll share some highs. There's actually not too many, but I'll also share some lows with you about this case. Before we begin, big thanks to SSUPD for providing the case review. But like all the reviews on this channel, I'm not paid by the manufacturers for them. This video is not sponsored by SSUPD. Another thing I'll note is that they were gracious enough to provide their tooling sample for the review. So even though we get to see this before the retail versions, there may be some manufacturing variances here and there, so just keep that in mind. And since they're still tweaking things, we'll be nice when we critique the finished quality here. SSUPD is literally a sister brand of Lanley. They're actually run by brother and sister now. Both brands are good friends of the channel here, and we've reviewed their goodies quite a bit here. You might be familiar with the small form factor meshlicious or mushroom cases. The Shuttle, or Xhuttle, Shuttle, is different. It's not an SFF case. It's an ATX case, 417 millimeters long by 237 millimeters wide by 508 millimeters tall. That works out to 50.2 liters, and the unique feature here is that it's rotated 90 degrees in order to place your graphics card front and center. So normally you'd have the card at the bottom or perhaps in a vertical mount, but despite the intriguing floating appearance of the card, there's no riser cable involved here. So it's simply rotated so that the motherboard's I/O section faces the top of the case, and the expansion slots, they run straight up and down. So the card is going to be hanging by its slot hangers. It's screwed into the top of the case, and then there's a little bit of a support foot that helps to distribute the load evenly. That prevents the card from rocking too much, although it doesn't physically prevent the card from moving side to side. The case has glass on two sides. It's the front and the side, so it's more of your aquarium style case, but the top is not clear. It is ventilated, and you can remove the top panel. You can place 320 millimeter fans there if you like. Because the motherboard and GPU's I/O is now upwards, there's a cutout at the back of the case that allows you to thread your cables through internally and then plug into the back of your board, plug into the back of your card. In fact, they run behind a little channel as well, so you actually won't see them through the glass from the side of the case. The case supports up to two 360 millimeter radiators. You can place another three 120 millimeter fans at the top, like I mentioned. The top panel is filtered too, so you'll want to use your judgment there, because if it does get in the way of how you plan to access the I/O for your GPU, because part of those ports will be blocked off, then you may not want to run fans there. You could even mount a side fan on the cable management tray side of the case. It's a little bit less useful there, but it is an option there. But the main ones, it's going to come with three reverse orientation RGB case fans, which are intakes at the bottom. Removable dust filter is there as well, and they are wired to the built-in RGB controller, which syncs up to the case's vertical LED strip. So if you don't want those, you can just put a radiator there as well. And then the other spot for a radiator, which is where I think most users are going to be mounting that AIO, it's going to be at the back of the case. There's also another removable dust filter there. One thing you can do with this case, you can rotate it another 90 degrees by moving the feet, the I/O panel, which has your USB-C, HD audio, and two USB-A ports, and then you run a pigtail for your power supply so that the outlet is at the back, and at that point you have an inverted ATX case. So that's not something you see very often, but I think that most users will actually want to display it this way, like I've built it up. Visually, this is how it looks the most intriguing, and instead of having a dust filter panel at the front of the build, you can see straight in, right? So for my build, I went with the new Ryzen 7 9800X 3D, excellent CPU. This was paired with an X870E RG Strix Crosshair Hero, the RG Strix LC3 360 LCD, 4080 Super Founders Edition, and 32 gigs of G.Skill 6000 megahertz RAM. Building this case is not difficult, other than the fact that the board looks a little bit different because it's rotated. It's approachable, even for new builders. I just mounted up the board first and then managed up the power supply cables. I'm using ASUS's low-key SFX-L power supply here. There's no reason to use an SFX or SFX-L size except for the fact that this was the only white one that I had handy. The case supports regular and back connect motherboards. Cable management side is quite deep because of that, and that's nice. So the cutouts are very intuitive. There's a spot for each rad fan. There's a little panel that hides your 24-pin connection, as well as other connection cables. So it's actually quite easy to find a clear path for each cable, and users will really appreciate this clean look here. So after that's all sorted out, I put in my rad, and that installs on a tray, and that kind of slots back easily. You can just screw it in. The Strix LC3 features a Gen 7 Asetek pump. The white rad, the fans, the tubing, and the pump, they all look really nice here together. The LCD screen is a plus. I had it displaying system parameters, but you can also use it for something fun like a GIF. Last thing, you'll want to slot your card in. So you just need to take out the necessary slot covers and then pop the card in. The way the 12 feet HPA cable comes out of the tray was a little bit odd. There is not a better cutout for that, but you know, it is what it is. Make sure you screw down the card securely because it's going to be hanging from the top, and just adjust that support foot so that's snug against the bottom of the card. You can clean up your cables at the back. One thing is you do have space here if you need for two 3.5-inch HDDs or two 2.5-inch SSDs on this side drive mount. If you need more space, you can use the cover for one additional 3.5-inch drive or two 2.5-inch drives, and those all sit in the cable management section. I'm using an M.2 here, but it's nice to know that storage is easily expandable and available for users that need it. The airflow is very interesting in this case. So it's normally you would want ventilation of your card because they all intake from what is typically the bottom of the case, but here you have a solid piece of glass, right? So that normally would be bad for the GPU temps, but the intake fans at the bottom actually bring air, deliver that to the card's fans, and to balance out the airflow, I'm actually just exhausting out the back. And here, I've got the 9800X ready on a 360mm rad, and we have plenty of headroom to be doing that in a gaming scenario. So we're just allowing the rad to be used this way. It's going to result in better GPU thermals as well. And you can just remove the dust filter at the back for better airflow if you're exhausting out the back. The bottom intakes also help a lot in that regard. We're not just exhausting GPU exhaust out of the rad because the fans are bringing in air for the radiator too. If you were to use top exhausts, which really aren't necessary for this airflow setup, you would actually be fighting the exhausting radiator a bit. So that's why I passed on those. And I think for most users, this is all the fan you need, just with an AIO. I did test with a heavy CPU render, and the temps are good, despite the fact that this rad is exhausting and the case is less airflow focused. The CPU temps are mostly comparable to a conventional mid-tower. Now, different cooler here, but just a sanity check, it's a tiny difference for the CPU. It won't result in any major performance difference. The intaking fans at the bottom do help the airflow here. Gaming thermals in a more CPU-limited game, such as in Far Cry 6, absolutely fantastic temps, and it's running very quietly here. It's barely audible and a delight to game with. CPU temps will start to show more of a difference because in this scenario, the radiator is the outlet for your GPU exhaust. So compared to the TD500 Max, which can run a front intake on the radiator, it's a bit warmer. No biggie for gaming though. In a more GPU limited scenario, at 100% GPU utilization, we see a little bit of a paradigm shift. The CPU is getting less utilization, so in theory, it should be running cooler, which we see with the TD500, but with the Shuttle, since the radiator is that exit point here, the higher GPU utilization actually results in higher temps for the CPU. Again, not an important difference here, but I did want to show you the kind of the pluses and minuses for thermals. The CPU isn't really going to run any differently for this scenario either, and the point here is more to show you where it stacks up in reference to a more conventional ATX case. You could run that radiator as a rear intake. In that scenario, you will raise the ambient temp in the case, so your GPU performance will suffer a little bit. So pairing that setup with top exhausts will definitely be preferable. And one appearance factor to consider is that you may want to get some reverse orientation fans for your AIO, since you may not like the look of your stock fans when they're just turned around. Still, I think the airflow setup just like this is fine for most gaming purposes, and it's a-okay. There's really nothing to be concerned about for performance-wise. High points of the case, even though it is a box, I like the out-of-the-box thinking here. It's very different, it's unique, and has a high-end appearance. It's airy, and even though I'm not a fan of RGB, I can actually appreciate that they've made it look good and work well together. Another plus is the clean cable management. It's intuitive, it builds up very clean and without much fuss, with the exception of the internal USB 3 header, which was kind of blocked off by one of the tie-down points, which is not a big deal here. I have another option here, but everything seemed to make sense, and this will be great for all builds, whether it's back connect or conventional boards. There's actually not too much I don't like about this case. As mentioned, this is a tooling sample, so some alignment issues were to be expected. The side panel closure was a little bit iffy, which may be due to the tooling sample, but mostly you can expect average build quality. It's not that bad, but certainly it's not high-end materials here. One little thing, they put effort into this cable concealment area over the motherboard, but I wish there was a cover at the top instead of this lengthened hole where you access the GPU's hanger. It kind of breaks with that clean aesthetic, but it's just a minor thing. One thing to be aware of, though, is that accessing cabling for your GPU and your motherboard's rear I/O is going to take a little bit more effort. So you may find yourself taking off the top cover quite a bit. So if you do that, then take note. If you're, the type of set it and forget it user, no problems here at all. Pricing, they're going with an MSRP of $140, which I think is fair. That is very slightly higher than is typical for an ATX case in this size range and feature bracket. But I think they did do a very good job here with the build experience. It's excellent, and the very forward thinking, perhaps. And while it's not going to take you to space, the shuttle can elevate your computing experience and liven up your space. So it's an unconventional approach to DIY PC. Builds up very clean and performs well. It's a modern looking piece of art. If you like the look, then I think you'll be very happy with this one. So thanks for joining me here. Please like and make sure you're subscribed if you love the review and you like this type of content. I will have links for the build components down below. And big thanks for watching today.